Welcome. I am your host and facilitator, Dr. Alwanda Bennett. I'm here with Simon Later, who I am getting to know. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Hey, I'm very well. I wonder how are you?
I am well. I'm here at home. I have my grandson here with me, so we could have some shenanigans, but for right now, we're good. We're good
Excellent.
to go. I
Excellent.
am so pleased to be speaking with you today. The reason that I reached out to you is because I found out that you're the guru, that you have the truth when it comes to podcasting. And I have quite a few people that follow me that are interested in this. And I wanted to have you come on and talk with us and educate us about it.
Okay, more than happy to. Great stuff.
Fantastic. So, start off for me. Tell me how you got started in podcasting because I've done it a couple of times. I've had a couple of false starts. So, please tell me how you began and how long ago did this journey become a reality for you?
Okay, so that's a really great question. To give you the kind of short answer, so I have a headhunting business. Okay, and this headhunting business was started back in 2005. Okay, and I've been through the crash of 2008. I've been through the sort of challenges of a few years ago, right? And then when we came to COVID, it became the last thing that people want to talk about is hiring, okay? Because hiring was the first thing to stop and the last thing to restart, okay? So we needed to find another way of engaging with our customer base. Okay, so for the very first time, I found myself in a kind of social media marketing school. Okay, I really put myself through that because I really needed to find a way to engage with my customers. Okay, because calling them up and talking to them about hiring, they don't want to talk about it. A lot of people, if you remember back then, not too dissimilar to now. Back then, people were just in fear of their jobs. So the idea of talking about hiring, nobody wanted to do that. So going through social media school, I found myself being asked to go on to people's podcasts. So I had quite an interesting story, and people were interested in talking about it. And what came up time and time again was, oh, you've got to start a podcast, or you should definitely start a podcast. So in the summer of 2020, I started a podcast, and it was terrible. It was awful. So clearly, I thought, okay, well, podcasting isn't for me. So then I kind of went away and licked my wounds, and I carried on going back on other people's podcasts. And again, the same thing was happening. Son, you've got to start a podcast. You've got to start a podcast. So this time, I did a lot more research, and rather than just starting a podcast and thinking it would just be successful, which I think a lot of people do, I spoke to a lot of the podcasters that were interviewing me, okay, and really looked to understand from them what made their podcast successful, okay. And it became very clear that there were an awful lot of common denominators amongst the podcasters that had seen success, that the ones that hadn't just weren't doing, okay. So I thought, right, okay, clearly there's a pattern here. So I'll put all those key points into my own podcast. So we
Okay.
launched the conference room, which is effectively Simon's Podcast 2.0. We launched that in December of 2020, and it was a great success.
Oh,
We went from a standing start within the first 8 or 9 months. We got to the top 10% of all podcasts globally. Okay, by the end of the first
whoa.
year, we were in the top 2%. Okay. Early part of our second year, we got into the top 1%. And then Thanksgiving last year, so just before our 2 year anniversary, we hit the top 0.5% of all podcasts globally. Okay. And we were also able to monetize it in our second year to six figures.
That is extraordinary.
All right. So, with all that, in the summer of 2022, we decided to launch Viva Podcasts. Okay. And Viva Podcasts is a consulting company that works with businesses to help them make money off of podcasting, so podcasting can drive revenue and drive leads into their business, and also look to podcasters to help them monetize their podcast. Okay, now currently, right now, we're not taking on any more private clients because we're fully maxed out. Okay, however, what's exciting is that we're going to be launching a membership at the beginning of June that's going to be in pre-launch mode over the next couple of months. And if anyone wants to join it in pre-launch mode, then they'll be getting it they'll be grandfathered in at a heavily discounted price. And also there's going to be affiliate opportunities that they'll be able to participate in as well. So lots of exciting stuff to come.
That's incredible. I wanted to ask you, when you saw that you guys were going into the black in terms of revenue,
Yeah.
what were some of the first things that you began to pursue? Did you go with marketing and sales? Did you go with client retention? What sorts of things were important to you once you reached critical mass? What sort of things became center stage for you and your team?
That's a great question. So one thing I want to point out is that all of the growth that I've talked about has been achieved without spending a dime on advertising. Okay, it's all been through organic growth. Okay, so we haven't spent a single dollar in advertising. Okay, so when the podcast was making money, we basically used the revenue to double down on the quality of our back office. Okay, so upscaling in terms of equipment, upscaling in terms of like editing, so the quality of the show being improved. Okay, but in terms of did we use that money and start like plowing it into Facebook advertising or Google ad? No, we didn't do anything like that.
Wow. So that was all through organic growth.
Yeah.
That is pretty exceptional and quite phenomenal.
Thank you.
As a project manager, when you tell me about this, I hear the angst of the, couple of false starts where you were beginning and then you had to reimagine it and come together again. That meant that to me, you had to do a lessons learned. You had to go back and get to the heart of what was happening with the original sort of launches. And then from there, build something newer and better. Am I right to think that it took a new mindset in order to take off in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely. Not so much mindset, but definitely in terms of understanding that the assumptions that I've made at the very beginning were entirely false. Okay, let me expand on that if I may. Okay, so when people were saying to me, Simon, go start a podcast, you're ideal for this, go start a podcast, I did what most people will do that haven't got a clue about what they were doing. I went and Googled it. Okay, and if you Google now how to start a podcast, almost all of the advice that you get says something like, go with what you know. Talk about what you know. Talk about what you're comfortable in discussing. All right. But there's one fatal flaw with that. Okay. Because I am the proof of that, because my first attempt at podcasting was a podcast all about hiring and recruitment and all that. I mean, I've been doing it for nearly, over 20 years, 22, 23 years at that point. So there aren't many people that know more about, I mean, if you're going to draw a list of the people that know most about hiring and retention and recruitment, I'm probably going to be on that list. All right. Because I've been doing it for so long. Right. However, here's where it fell down. All right. Let me give you a really good example. All right. I put on socks every morning. I'm really good at it. Okay. I can stand on one leg and put the other leg into the sock, and I can do it the right way around and everything. All right.
Okay.
And I would say I'm a world expert in putting on socks. However, I'm not sure I really want to do a podcast about it. All right. Because it's not something I'm excited about. It's not something I'm passionate about. It's not something about which I have intellectual curiosity. All right. And for me, the key thing And this was the key step, the key change that I made between the first version of the podcast, which thank God never saw the light of day, and the second version, which has gone on to be, thankfully very, very successful, is all about intellectual curiosity and passion. Okay, I am by nature an intellectually curious person. Okay, and that gives me passion. But at the same time, if it's a subject that I want to understand more about, and a subject that I'm curious about and want to talk to the best in the business about, it could be anything. It just happens to be about business growth. That's what the conference room and podcast. That's what it's about. It's about business growth. Okay, but I would say the core piece of advice that changed between podcast number one and podcast number two, and this is what when in Viva Podcast we talk about extensively, is don't necessarily podcast about what you know about. Podcast about what you are passionate about and what you are curious about. Now, the two may go hand in hand, okay? But if you know everything about a particular subject and that subject is quite finite, it's going to be very hard for a podcast to have longevity, okay? Whereas if it's something that's very big and broad, okay, as a subject matter, and it's something that you are curious about and you're passionate about, then you will have infinite things to talk about.
All right.
Let me give you a statistic, okay?
Okay.
So, according to recent studies, okay, there are approximately 5 million podcasts on Spotify and iTunes, okay? Active.
Right.
However, if you actually dig into Spotify or iTunes, there's close to, I think, 100 million podcasts out there. 100 million, okay? Which means 95 million, 95% of them are inactive podcasts, which means someone did half a dozen episodes and then it just died, okay? So approximately 5% of podcasts that are out there are active live podcasts. The other 95% have died, okay? People have done a few and then they'll just stop doing them. They're still registered on there, you can still go and find them, but they're not still updating them. They're not putting out new episodes, all right? Now, from the research that we did internally, the single biggest reason for that is due to a lack of proportionality between input and output, as in the amount of effort, time, energy that people are putting in versus what they're getting out. Okay, which basically means it's costing them more to put out a podcast in either time, money, resources, whatever, than the money they're getting out from it. It's not paying for itself. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, and reason number two, is they just run out of ideas or just get bored of doing it. Okay.
Got it.
If you are passionate about your subject matter and you have found a way to monetize at least to a point where it's paying for itself, there'll be never any reason for you to stop doing it.
That's incredible. Okay, so just to make sure that I'm tracking, what you would do is find something that you have a great deal of intellectual curiosity about and that you're passionate about, and that would be your podcast content in terms of how you select topics, how you select guests that are centered around this, and then using that idea set, that concept, that's how you got a lot of adoption, a lot of user growth, and a lot of monetization using your podcast because you were working on things that were interesting to you, compelling reasons for connecting with people, and leading to greater growth because you were working on something that you had a little bit of information about what you were gathering more during the podcast.
That's right, absolutely. And to be honest, that makes for a much better conversation as well, because if you're in a bilateral conversation like we are now, you and I are talking, okay?
Right.
It makes a much better learning experience for the listeners if one of the people on the podcast are learning as well, okay? because effectively you are bringing the audience in to a learning environment, and they are and if you're a good host, and one was last, I think one is, if you're a good host, then you are effectively playing the role of the audience. Okay. Now, you and I, I'm sure, have listened to a lot of bad podcasts where you just get frustrated and irritated and you don't feel you've learned enough from it. Now, more often than not, it's not because the guest was a bad guest. More often than not, it's because the host was a bad host, insofar as they weren't playing the role of the audience. Okay? The best hosts are the ones that, to all intents and purposes, stay in their lane. Okay? Now, I've had a couple of people on the podcast who are recruiters and hiring consultants. Okay? I may well have known as much, if not more, about their subject matter than they did. But
Right.
I never strayed from my lane. Okay? I always made sure that they were the expert on the call. Okay? Now, I may have offered perspective. I may have offered, some kind of play devil's advocate if they said something that I didn't necessarily agree with, just so we could like debate the point.
Right.
But I never position myself as the expert in anything, because my role isn't the expert. My role is to be the ears and the mouthpiece of the audience, and because that way it makes the conversation far richer, and in turn the experience for the listener much more rewarding.
Something that I think that my audience would be curious about is how much would it cost them to start, and what sorts of things would they need in order to begin their podcast. I used a software called Anchor.fm and one called Podmatic. Those are the two that I used. And this other thing that would work with the sound that would help you make a better audio. What are some of the things you feel like brand new podcasters need to invest in?
Okay, so I'm a big believer in start super in any business venture that I've done. The podcast, it's certainly sensible to think of it as a business venture. Okay, start off paying absolutely as minimal as possible. In fact,
Okay.
as far as possible, nothing at all. Okay, so if you have a laptop, or you have a computer that's got a camera on it, or even if you've got a smartphone, okay, you don't need any more equipment. Okay, you don't need any more equipment. You can spend a fortune. I mean, I've got a microphone that I'm talking to you now that cost, I think, $300-400. But the first half a dozen episodes of the podcast, I was using my laptop and the built-in microphone and camera. All right. Only when things started to take off did I take some of the proceeds from the podcast and invest money in a decent camera and a decent microphone. All right. As far as software, there's plenty of either free or super cheap software that's out there. For the most part, we record in Zoom. Okay, we can also Zoom is free if you're using it to have conversations for less than 40 minutes. It's free.
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of podcasters use Zoom for that reason, because their recording and sound capability is perfectly fine. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily use Zoom if I was going to be recording a symphony with a 70s orchestra, but for two people talking, Zoom is fine. Okay, and really, once you've done that, you can edit using if you're on a PC, Audacity is free, so you can edit using Audacity. I know there are, I think, is it it's called Sound Garage or Warehouse or something that Apple has. Forgive me, I'm not on iTunes. Sorry, I'm not an Apple guy, so I don't really know exactly what the packages are there. But there are certainly there's free editing software available on the iMac as well. When it comes to, if you want to start getting a bit more flashy and using like transcription and transcribing software, I'm not aware of any that are free. Although that being said, if you can maybe run it through some relatively free sort of dictation software that's out there, but Descript is like $15 a month. So you can get some pretty low cost solutions, even if you want to start, upping your game in terms of what it's going to be, right? And the distribution software. So you'll need to have software that then distributes it out onto Spotify, iTunes, etc., etc. The distribution software that you need. You mentioned Anchor. Okay, Anchor is now part of Spotify. It's now called Spotify for Podcasters, or Spotify Podcasting, maybe it's called. And it's free. I mean, yeah, there are paid versions of it, but the free version is perfectly adequate. Okay, so in terms of how much money does someone need to spend to start a podcast, the answer is 0.
Now, one of the things that attracted me to calling you is that you were saying that you found your way through making it profitable. Do you have a process that is proprietary, or would you say that this experience you've just been able to make it a repeatable process?
It's definitely repeatable. The process that we have, that we teach to people, really covers pretty much any monetization strategy that people want to pursue. Okay, so we have, for example, one way that people monetize their podcasts is through advertising. Now, I have to tell you, that's not a way that we spend an awful lot of time talking about, because advertising is very high effort and not very high yield. Okay, it's not something that is, you don't get a lot of bang for your buck. Let's put it that way. All right, or not a lot of buck for your bang, if you like. Right,
Right,
it
right.
works very hard. You don't get a lot for it. Sponsorships also are, people think, oh yeah, sponsorship's going to be amazing. You have to work incredibly hard to get anything that's in any way lucrative from a sponsorship deal. Okay, and they can also be very restrictive as well. Okay, so yeah, you can make money off of sponsorship. The likelihood is it's not going to be particularly high. Yeah, you can make money off of advertising, but again, it's likely not to be particularly high. So there are a number of other methods that we spend a lot more time talking about. For example, um, using your podcast to support your affiliate marketing ventures. So if you're, and again, this all comes down to audience growth. Okay, you need to have a substantial audience in order to do this. And again, we spend a lot of time working with our clients, and a lot of stuff's going to be inside our membership that's driven towards audience growth. Okay, once you have a sizable audience, okay, and an audience that's loyal and that's engaged, you can use that you can monetize that through affiliate marketing. Okay, affiliate marketing is an incredibly powerful way, and frankly, when you hear about influencers and YouTubers making gazillions of dollars, they, for the most part, are doing it through affiliate marketing. Okay, so affiliate marketing is a big facet of monetization. Okay, another way is through selling your own products as well. Okay, so if you have your own physical products or virtual products, using your podcast and talking to your audience and building a rapport with your audience, and they get to know you. Remember, people won't buy from you until they trust you. They can't trust you until they like you, and they won't like you until they know you. Building that up through your podcast, it's worth remembering. A podcast is an incredibly intimate experience. Okay, unlike, okay, Facebook Lives, LinkedIn Lives are great. Okay, they really are. However, when you're listening to a podcast, it becomes much more intimate. Okay, because if you think about it, you are almost always doing something else. Right now, the likelihood is the people that are watching this are dedicating their attention purely to this. Okay, so they stop what they're doing and they're purely doing this. Okay, however, if somebody is listening to a podcast, the chances are that they are gardening, doing the dishes, doing the housework, driving, okay, going for a walk, in the gym, that sort of thing. All right. All of these things are far more intimate activities. You're inviting somebody into the gym with you while you're working out. You're inviting somebody into your kitchen while you're doing the dishes. You're inviting someone into your bedroom while you're sorting the laundry. These are all far more, it creates a much more intimate relationship and a much more trusted relationship between the listener and the podcaster, which in turn means that the person that is listening feels a much more of an affinity with the podcaster than they would if it was, for example, a LinkedIn Live or a Facebook Live. Okay, so with that in mind, what then happens is, because you're building up this affinity, you'll find that when you then start to talk about your own physical products or your own personal products, what then happens is that what then happens is you then have a much more loyal audience, that in turn is able to and is willing to buy from you. Okay, so that's another way. Selling your own products, selling your and also selling affiliate products as well. Okay, so those are just two ways. Okay, there's another way which I'll turn to in just a second, but those two ways require building a sizable audience and having having a strategy that not only helps you grow your audience, as in bring in new listeners, which is important, but as importantly, retains existing listeners. Okay. When people talk about audience, if I can just park on this for 1 second, if people talk about audience growth, okay, audience growth is when people talk. This kind of really, I get quite passionate about this. When people talk about audience growth, they're oversimplifying two very different things. Okay, if you want to grow your audience, okay, you need to do two things. Okay, think about, if you want to fill a bathtub, okay, you can be pouring in as much water as you want, but if you haven't put the stopper, you haven't put the plug in, as quickly as the water's coming in, it's going to come out again. Okay, audience growth requires not just attracting new listeners, but ensuring that you're retaining your existing listeners, and there are very different strategies that need to be followed in order to do both. Okay, and so when we talk about audience growth, it's very important that people realize that that requires having the right strategy in place to attract new listeners, but also having a strategy in place to retain your existing listeners. Okay, to go through it in detail, it's going to be beyond the scope of our discussion right now, but it's important that people realize that these two things are quite different and require their own strategy in place.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, how long did it take you? First of all, how many followers do you have, or subscribers do you have at present for your podcast?
So we don't actually we're not really in a position to share those figures. Okay.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that we recently surpassed 325,000 downloads. Okay.
So 325K just in downloads alone.
Yeah. Okay. And we currently, I mean, at the moment, we're probably trending around. I mean, on average now, we're probably trending around 5,000 listeners per episode, there or thereabouts. Okay. But and that's from Spotify alone. Okay.
From a single platform.
Yeah, that's our preferred platform. Okay. From iTunes, if you I think that our spread is probably around 60-40. I mean, when I say I can't give exact numbers, it's because I don't actually have them to hand. But I would say we probably get probably 7,000 or 8,000 downloads per episode, there or thereabouts.
That's super. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to do is to tell people, how could they get in touch with you after this particular call that we're having right now, to learn more about what it is you've done. I want them to know how they can reach you directly and catch up with you, especially if they want to know more about how to do this podcasting, because I know there's a lot of people that are very interested in it.
Okay, so the easy thing to do is to go look for Viva Podcasts. Okay,
Yes.
if you go look for Viva Podcasts on Facebook, then you'll find us there. Okay, you can also search for me, Simon Lader, either on Viva. You'll find me on Facebook. You'll find me on LinkedIn. Alternatively, if you really want to get a head start, okay, if you go to vivapodcasts.com/podcast power ups. That's vivapodcasts.com/podcast power ups. It's a fantastic freebie we're giving away. It's a collection of our most requested PDFs, infographics that will really help people get started when it comes to setting up their podcast, growing their audience, and starting to monetize. Okay, and it's absolutely free. If you just go to vivapodcasts.com/podcast power ups, no dashes, nothing in there, then that'll be a great thing for people to download and really be able to get.
Okay, let me see if I can get to it right now, Simon, before we leave, because I want to drop it in the chat. Hold on.
Yeah.
Wait for it to come up. I've got one of those fantastic computers that's moving like it's from the 80s, you know. It's moving at a sensational speed. I said, you know, if you okay, so wait a minute. Not as good at it. If you could drop it in the chat, Simon, because I feel like it's just operator error at this point.
Right there.
Let me see. Yeah, drop it in the chat if you can. And there's a chat that's just between me and you, and let's see if it'll work. Then I'll drop it out to the world. Did you see that chat box on our end that just says private chat? Oh, I see it there. Okay, wait, let me do that. Aha, it's coming up and it's most beautiful. I'm gonna drop it in the chat and also share it on my screen in a moment so that we can kind of talk people through about what they'll see when they get there. Because I know they'll be curious, and just so happens we have a device that'll let us do that, right? Where we can kind of share what it is that we're looking at. So let me attempt that. Let me see. Oh, sweet. I got it up. It's awesome. Let me share my screen briefly. You guys are about to enjoy a sweet podcast here. Hold on. This is sweet, guys. You're going to love it. All right. I don't know. Are you able to see it, Simon? I hope you are.
Yeah. I can see it.
All right. So I'm going to take people around. I'm going to be the driver. You could talk them through it. So I'll do the driving. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to say, yes, I want this, because there's a huge green button here that'll let me do that. I'll click, yes, I want this. There's a lot of stuff out there.
I think you have to fill in your name and your email address.
All right. Mine is moving at the speed of ancient thought. I just think it's just my computer being mean to me. But at any rate, it's fairly straightforward. You go to this Viva podcast, and that's one way you can get in. And from there, you can sign up and become a part. I want to drop that in the chat and allow folks to experience that firsthand so they can have that. And I'm going to leave that with them. Simon, I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to yield the floor to you. I'm going to stop sharing that and have you and I come back. What is the last thought you want to leave on people's mind as they're considering coming into the business and starting podcasting? What's the last word you'd like to leave with them?
It's the gold rush right now. Okay, imagine the gold rush in the 1930s. Okay, Okay, let me tell you this. All right, there are 70 million emails sent every day. 70 million emails. So no more. 70 billion emails sent every day. Okay, and there are 5 million active podcasts out there. All right, and if you think how much time and energy and effort we put into sending emails to our clients and trying to build a business through email. And yet, podcasting is by comparison so small. Okay,
It's a niche.
it's very absolutely. And so if you have a business and you're looking to drive leads or revenue from that business, podcasting is the way to do it. Okay, I had zero experience in podcasting, and by the time I got to the end of my first year of doing it, I made not a lot but some money. But into my second year, that's when it really took off. Okay, and if you want to have a business that's generating a significant amount of money, then podcasting may well be the ideal way to do it. Okay, that's what I would like to leave people with. And if you currently have a podcast and it's not making any money, then it's simple. You either don't have a monetization strategy, and we can help you with that, or you don't have an audience growth strategy, and we can definitely help you with that. And
Well, no, give me 1 minute. Well, I will say this. I want to thank you, Simon, and I appreciate you sharing this with us. And I'll be connecting with you again. I'd certainly love to interview you again as well.
I'd love that. Thank you very much. I'll come back whenever you want me.
Thank you so much.